Have you ever stared at a blank page, paralyzed by the thought that whatever you write won't be good enough? Or maybe you've rewritten the same message 3 times before hitting send, not because the words were wrong, but because they weren't perfect. You pause before speaking, you delay taking action, you obsess over details that no one else will ever notice. You tell yourself, I'm just a perfectionist. But what if that's not true? What if your need to be perfect is not a desire for excellence, but a fear of something far more unsettling? What if you're not a perfectionist? What if you're simply afraid of your own power? Carl Jung, the famed Swiss psychoanalyst, once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's where our journey begins. This is not a video about tips to stop overthinking or how to beat perfectionism with productivity hacks. This is something deeper, something darker. This is a descent into the part of you that hides behind excellence, behind control, behind perfection. Because beneath that polished surface lies a fear so profound that it shapes your entire life. The fear of being seen in your full, untamed power. Imagine this. You're in school. You raise your hand too often. You're told to let others speak. You draw attention. You're told to tone it down. You have strong emotions. You're told to calm down. You begin to learn. Being bold is dangerous. Being fully expressed is unsafe. So you shrink. But you do it artfully. You become excellent. You master your tone, your appearance, your words. You achieve. You shine. Just enough to be admired, not so much to be threatening. And the world rewards you. It tells you you're responsible, that you're high-functioning, that you're smart. But Jung would argue that what you're really doing is suppressing the deepest parts of yourself. Not because you're lazy or weak, but because you're afraid. Afraid of chaos. Afraid of judgment. Afraid that if you stop trying to control everything, the real you might emerge. And that version of you, the one who's angry, passionate, radiant, irrational, unapologetically wild, might be too much for this world. So instead, you hide behind perfection. But perfection is a prison. And today, we will walk through its gates. This video explores a different side of perfectionism, not as a personality trait, but as a psychological defense, a coping strategy, a shield we build when we are not ready to accept the power that lies within us. We will dive deep into Carl Jung's ideas of the shadow, the individuation process, and psychic energy, and how these relate to the modern obsession with perfection. We will explore why so many high achievers secretly feel empty, why people who are praised for their polish feel dead inside, why the pursuit of flawlessness often conceals a buried truth, that we are afraid to be fully human. Because being human is messy. Being powerful is messy, but being real is where our freedom begins. Throughout this video, you'll encounter ideas that may unsettle you. You may begin to recognize patterns you've justified for years. You may feel resistance. That's natural, because what you're about to hear is not comfortable, but it may be one of the most important truths you'll ever face. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness includes your mess, your madness, your power, and your light. So sit with me. Let us descend together into the architecture of your psyche, into the shadows you've tried to master with perfection. We will follow Jung's path, through fear, through truth, and, if you dare, to your liberation. Let's start with the mask you wear, the one Jung called the persona. It's the version of you that smiles politely, says the right thing, dresses acceptably, performs well. Society loves your persona. It's clean, it's reliable, it's polished. But here's the problem. The more perfect your persona becomes, the more you disappear behind it. And Carl Jung warned us, what we repress in the light of our persona doesn't vanish. It retreats into the shadow. Your shadow is every part of you you've been told not to be. It's your raw ambition, your sensuality, your defiance, your rage, your instinct. It's your mess, your chaos, your irrational brilliance. It's your power, locked in a dungeon because it doesn't play nice. Perfectionism, in this light, isn't about standards. It's about fear. It's the compulsive urge to polish the self into a version that no longer threatens rejection, even if it means silencing your own soul. And what fuels this compulsion? Jung would say, psychic energy. Let's explain. Jung believed that your psyche, your full, internal world, is powered by a limited supply of psychic energy. You can think of it like the battery of your soul. And every time you force yourself to behave, speak, dress, or feel in a way that's not aligned with your deeper self, you're using up that energy. But when you do it constantly, when you never allow your wild, creative, imperfect self to emerge, you begin to drain your battery, not by doing too much, but by doing the wrong things for too long. This is the paradox Jung saw in many high performers. They are burned out, not from lack of energy, but from redirected energy, from constantly feeding a persona while starving the soul. And here's where perfectionism becomes dangerous, because it doesn't just exhaust your psyche, it fragments it. You split off parts of yourself to survive, a process Jung called psychic dissociation. You live on the surface, while deeper parts of you grow angry, abandoned, and distorted in the unconscious. And then, those disowned parts start to rise, not with logic, but with sabotage. You procrastinate, you panic, you overthink, you freeze, you sabotage relationships, you collapse under the weight of the image you built. And the world calls this perfectionism. But Jung calls it something else, the failure to integrate the shadow. Here's the truth. Perfectionism doesn't mean you strive for excellence. It means you're terrified of your inner chaos. Terrified of what might surface if you stop trying so hard to be liked, approved, admired. Perfectionism is control, but not over the world, over yourself. Because you don't trust what might rise if you let go. You fear your impulses, your flaws, your voice, your truth. You call it not good enough. Jung calls it repression. And repression is dangerous, because the shadow doesn't go away. It waits. It grows. It whispers. You've silenced me, but I will not vanish. You've hidden me, but I will show myself. You've denied me, but I am you. And sooner or later, the shadow bursts through, in addiction, anxiety, burnout, or collapse. It shows up in the voice in your head that screams at you after every mistake. It shows up in your dreams, in your relationships, in your compulsions. It shows up in your perfectionism, that constant war to appear okay, when deep down, you know you're not. Because perfectionism isn't peace. It's a prison you built from fear. Let's take Ava, a 34-year-old marketing director. High-performing, detail-oriented. Every email is curated, every presentation flawless. She's admired by her colleagues. She never misses a deadline. But Ava can't sleep. She replays conversations. She re-edits emails she's already sent. She avoids risk. She overprepares. She hides in her work because intimacy feels terrifying. Why? Because she spent her whole life building the perfect image, one that never makes mistakes, one that's always composed, one that gets praise but feels nothing inside. Ava doesn't need productivity tips. She doesn't need another journal. She needs to face the truth. She's not a perfectionist. She's afraid of who she might become if she stopped trying to be perfect. Jung would say Ava is cut off from her instinct, her passion, her wildness, her soul. Her psychic energy is trapped in a false identity. And until she reclaims it, not just intellectually, but emotionally, she will never feel whole. So how do we escape? Jung offers a path, not to perfection, but to individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the self. It's not about being good. It's about being real. It means facing your shadow, not to fix it, but to understand it. It means acknowledging your anger, your jealousy, your desire, your fear, without shame. It means listening to the parts of you that you silenced to fit in. It means giving yourself back the power you abandoned to stay safe. And that's terrifying, because wholeness is messy. Wholeness is complex. Wholeness is power. But it's also freedom. Jung warned of a subtle trap in modern culture, the worship of the good self. We try to be moral, controlled, kind, productive, respectable. But what if being good is killing your spirit? What if your obsession with being good is just a fear of being fully alive? Because life isn't good or bad. It's wild. It's contradiction. It's paradox. And the more you pursue the image of perfection, the more you cut yourself off from the richness of your humanity. I am not what happened to me, Jung wrote. I am what I choose to become. But you cannot become if you only accept the parts of you that are clean, polite, and palatable. You must reclaim the whole. That includes the darkness. That includes the flame. That includes your power. Let's drop the mask further. You think you're trying to be the best version of yourself. You think you're striving for excellence. But in reality, you're just trying to be acceptable. And what you call perfectionism is often a carefully constructed form of self-rejection. I must not make mistakes. I must not be seen as weak. I must not show anger. I must not be too much. Notice the pattern? Perfectionism is rarely about who you want to be. It's about who you're afraid to be. The real you, the one that makes messy art, says the wrong thing, laughs too loudly, cries unexpectedly, and speaks truths others aren't ready to hear, has been labeled too risky by your inner critic. So instead, you sculpt yourself into a digestible version. But Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And perfectionism doesn't lead you there. It leads you to approval, not authenticity. It leads you to performance, not peace. Now here's where it gets darker. Not just personally, but collectively. We live in a culture that rewards the illusion of control. The tidy resume, the clean aesthetic, the optimized identity. We scroll through social media feeds curated to perfection, filtered, retouched, choreographed. And we compare ourselves, not to people, but to avatars. So what do? We adapt. We trim away the unruly parts of our soul. We align with the algorithm. We sell the version of ourselves that's most likable, most successful, most robotic. In short, we betray ourselves to be loved. But here's the tragedy Jung warned about. Every time you betray your true self for belonging, you bury a piece of your soul. And what you bury becomes the shadow. Here's the twist. You think your perfectionism is about being liked, loved, accepted. But at its core, it's about avoiding power. Your power is not perfection. It's truth. It's presence. It's being fully here, flaws, failures, and fire included. But you've been conditioned to fear this power. Because power makes you visible. Power makes you vulnerable to envy, judgment, rejection, and perhaps worst of all, power makes you responsible. If you owned your full power, you'd have to stop blaming your inner limits on perfectionism. You'd have to admit, I am capable of more than I'm allowing myself to be. And that truth is terrifying, because it means your life, in its current form, is a cage of your own making. And the key? It was never perfection. It was permission. Permission to be real. Let's challenge another myth. People say perfectionists fear failure. But Jung might ask, what if the real fear is success? Not the shallow kind of success, the social applause, the raise, the praise, but the deep kind. The kind that happens when you unleash your true voice. When you live from your essence. When you stop hiding. What if you fear that, once you taste your own power, you won't be able to go back? What if you're afraid that once you become the person you were born to be, you'll lose the people who only loved your mask? That fear is valid, because you will lose people, but you will gain yourself. And isn't that worth everything? Meet Daniel, a respected psychotherapist. He guides others through healing every day. Calm, thoughtful, measured. But in his private life, he's emotionally numb. He can't cry. He can't feel joy. He hasn't laughed from the belly in years. Why? Because he spent decades performing stability, containing his emotions, being this safe space for others. His perfectionism didn't make him strong. It made him hollow. He's disconnected not because he's broken, but because he's over-controlled. Jung would say Daniel has over-identified with the persona, the healer, the wise man. But he's forgotten his shadow, the playful, chaotic, spontaneous inner child. The one who once danced freely. The one who felt everything. His healing won't come from more control. It will come from surrender. From letting the parts he buried speak again. Modern psychology supports Jung's warnings. Studies show that chronic perfectionism is linked to depression, anxiety disorders, obsessive-compulsive tendencies, eating disorders, burnout, emotional numbness. Why? Because perfectionism is emotional repression masquerading as discipline. You aren't expressing yourself. You're editing yourself in real time. And your nervous system? It feels it. Every unspoken truth. Every hidden tear. Every buried desire. Your body knows when you're faking. And it slowly shuts down. Until one day, you wake up and say, I don't know who I am anymore. One of the most seductive lies in self-help culture is the mantra, you are enough. But there's often an invisible asterisk. You are enough if you are productive, attractive, emotionally regulated, socially appropriate, and constantly improving. That's not self-worth. That's spiritualized perfectionism. Jung would demand something more radical. To say, I am enough, not because you've perfected yourself, but because you've included your imperfections. To accept yourself not despite your shadow, but with it. That's real integration. And that's the doorway to real freedom. Sometimes, the shadow doesn't wait for permission. It explodes. A breakdown, a panic attack, a divorce, a midlife crisis. These aren't failures. These are your soul's rebellion. They're reminders that your perfectionism has failed to protect you, that the parts you disowned are not dead. They are louder than ever. And the longer you run, the louder they become, until the only way forward is not up, but into the shadow, into the fire, into the truth of who you've always been beneath the mask. You've built a beautiful cage. You've painted the walls with accomplishment, decorated the bars with praise, and lined the floor with the soft velvet of approval. And yet, you cannot breathe. This is the turning point. Not when everything falls apart, but when you realize you've been the one holding the door shut all along. It's not the world that demands your perfection. It's you. You've mistaken control for security. You've mistaken stillness for peace. You've mistaken perfection for love. But Jung saw what many cannot. That true power doesn't come from perfection. It comes from wholeness. And wholeness includes what you've buried. The rage, the sensuality, the grief, the joy that makes you look foolish, the ambition that makes you seem arrogant, the truth that might make you unlikable. This is the paradox. What you've spent your whole life trying to suppress is the very thing that could set you free. There's a version of you that doesn't obsess over every word, every move, every mistake. A version of you that speaks without rehearsing, that creates without doubting, that loves without apologizing, that fails and keeps going, that feels deeply and still stands tall. This version of you isn't perfect, but they are powerful because they are whole. And here's what Jung knew. Until you allow the imperfect, irrational, wild parts of yourself to live, you are not alive. You're just rehearsing life. But now the performance is over. The curtain has fallen, and your shadow is no longer your enemy. It's your invitation. You're not afraid of being imperfect. You're afraid of what might happen if you stopped hiding. You're afraid of what might rise from the depths if you open the door. But that thing you fear, that's you. Unmasked, unedited, unafraid. And maybe, just maybe, that's the version the world needs the most. You've made it to the end. Or rather, to a beginning. Because now that you see the truth of your perfectionism, you can no longer unsee it. You know, it wasn't just about doing things right. It was about staying safe. It was about hiding in plain sight. It was about building a fortress of excellence to shield you from the terror of being fully seen, in all your brilliance, chaos, contradiction, and power. But now the fortress feels like a prison. So let's talk about escape. Jung believed that when we repress parts of ourselves, we don't destroy them. We simply redirect their energy. Psychic energy, he called it. The life force that fuels your creativity, your relationships, your courage. And for years, that energy has been spent maintaining your mask. So the first step? Call your energy back. When you feel the urge to perfect, pause. Ask, who am I trying to protect right now? When you obsess over a detail, ask, what am I afraid might happen if I let this be enough? When you feel burned out, don't ask what you need to do. Ask what part of you has been silenced. Let your mess speak. Let your intuition whisper. Let your shadow rise, not to destroy you, but to free you. A perfectionist often struggles with boundaries, not just with others, but with themselves. Because you're not just afraid of disappointing people, you're afraid of disappointing the image you've created. But healing begins when you start saying, this is enough. I am enough. My energy matters more than my image. Create space in your life to rest, to be bad at things, to say no, to disappoint others gracefully, and to allow yourself to exist without explanation. Perfection isn't the price of love. Presence is. The ultimate Jungian path is individuation, the journey of becoming your truest, most integrated self. This isn't about becoming flawless. It's about becoming whole. How do you begin? Journal without editing. Let your unconscious speak. Create something messy, a drawing, a dance, a poem that no one else will see. Explore your shadow. What parts of you do you judge most harshly? What traits in others trigger you? Those are clues to your own disowned power. Seek silence. Let your inner voice rise, without distraction, without noise. You will be uncomfortable. You will feel raw. But that discomfort? It's the death of the mask and the birth of you. Perfectionism is not just a psychological trait. It's a spiritual crisis. because it keeps you from the sacred truth that you are already whole, even in your flaws, even in your confusion, even in your darkness. Carl Jung didn't want you to be perfect. He wanted you to be real, to touch the depth of your humanity, to know your own darkness, to reclaim your buried voice, to stand in your full power, not with arrogance, but with intimacy. Because once you are intimate with your shadow, you are no longer afraid of yourself. And when you're no longer afraid of yourself, the world can no longer control you. That is real freedom. Let me ask you something. Have you ever spent so long perfecting yourself that you lost sight of who you actually are? Have you ever buried your instincts, your boldness, your truth, just to be accepted? Tell us in the comments. What part of yourself are you ready to reclaim? And if this video touched something deep in you, something raw, something true, let it show. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who hides their brilliance behind perfection. Because maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop striving to be perfect and start remembering how to be whole.